James has a strong desire for sex. Every night, he feels the urge to find a girl on the street and take her home or to the hotel with him. He can't seem to resist this temptation. It's become a regular part of his routine. He doesn't like spending the night alone. So, he seeks out companionship in this way. Despite being 30 years old and successful in his career, James struggles with a strong desire for sex. He takes his work seriously and has achieved financial stability, but this aspect of his personal life troubles him. Although his friends suggest that he settles down and starts a family, James has his reservations. He dreams of marrying a virgin, but he believes that it's nearly impossible to find one in the city where he lives. He has noticed that many people around are involved in activities like runs, prostitution, and casual hookups. Joyce and Daisy are strikingly similar sisters who have been orphaned and rely on each other for support. While they share a close resemblance, Joyce is 25 and Daisy is 23 years old. Despite their bond, their paths in life have diverged. Joyce engages in prostitution to make ends meet for herself and her sister. Joyce got sick with malaria and couldn't do her job anymore, so she asked Daisy to do it instead. But Daisy said no, because she didn't want to have sex with strangers. This made Joyce really mad because she needed the money. She felt like Daisy was letting her down because she felt like Daisy was not helping them survive like they had planned. Joyce got even more upset with Daisy and told her she had to go out to work or move out of her house. Daisy didn't want to leave, but she stayed firm and said she wouldn't change her mind because she wanted to keep her virginity and stick to her beliefs. Reluctantly, Daisy gave in to Joyce's demand. As she got ready to leave, Joyce dressed her up in her own clothes, necklaces, bracelets, and earrings before she left. Daisy, dressed in revealing clothes, stood by the roadside, and then an expensive car pulled up in front of her. It's James. He asked her how much for a night, and Daisy, still feeling bitter, reluctantly gave the price. James then invited her to get into the car. Inside the car, James began to touch Daisy's legs, complimenting her beauty. Despite her irritation, Daisy tried to force a smile, though her true feelings were evident in her expression. When they arrived at the hotel, Daisy felt nervous. James suggested they go to the club to have fun before heading to the room, but Daisy didn't agree. However, James promised to pay her more, so Daisy reluctantly accepted. In the club, James offered Daisy a drink, but she refused because she doesn't drink and doesn't know much about these kinds of places. James insisted, and eventually, Daisy felt pressured to drink. Daisy's main reason for being there was to avoid being kicked out by her sister. James noticed Daisy's hesitance and timid behavior and assumed she was new to the kind of work. Daisy became very drunk and couldn't function properly. Seeing this, James decided to take her to the room he had arranged for himself and her. He gently placed her on the bed and then left to freshen himself up. James entered the room and tried to wake up Daisy, but she wasn't responding well due to her being heavily intoxicated. He then proceeded to undress both himself and Daisy. Daisy, in her intoxicated state, managed to protest against James' advances, telling him she's a virgin. However, James dismissed her words, thinking she was just talking because she was drunk. He continued trying to be intimate with her, but Daisy kept on repeating that she is a virgin. Daisy cried out, "I'm not a prostitute. I just need this money so that my sister won't send me away from her house." Frustrated, James insisted that she should stop talking and eventually raised his voice, telling her that her payment is on the table and to be quiet. Daisy finally complied, and James proceeded with his actions, despite her continued objections. James has never kissed the street girls. He just brings out his rod and goes inside them, but this time he felt like kissing Daisy. He felt she is special and admired her beautiful face. He kissed and romanced Daisy. Then he went inside her, though he was wearing protection. It is his first time enjoying sex. Her body is tight, not loose like other girls he has been with. He enjoyed himself before they slept off. James woke up in the morning expecting to see Daisy beside him, but she wasn't there. Confused, he looked around the room, but Daisy was nowhere to be found. As James got out of the bed, he noticed bloodstains everywhere, on the sheets, his body, and around the room. Shocked and alarmed, he realized the significance of the stains and what had likely occurred during the night. Despite his initial admiration for Daisy, James felt really bad because he realized Daisy was telling the truth about being a virgin. He regretted taking her virginity for money. As he walked to the bathroom, he saw Daisy's necklace that she left behind. James felt really bad about what happened with Daisy. He knew he had to find her and apologize, so he quickly got dressed and left the hotel to look for her. Meanwhile, Daisy woke up feeling confused and ashamed. She left the hotel in a hurry, not wanting to see James or anyone else from that night again. Feeling really down, Daisy went home. She decided to give back the money James had given to her. James had given her to Joyce. Joyce felt really happy seeing the huge amount because no one had ever paid her that much for one night's work, even though her sister's face showed her that she was hurting. Daisy hissed in pain as she walked slowly, feeling discomfort from her encounter with James. She went into the bathroom to take a bath. Seeing her sister's discomfort, Joyce laughed and told her she would get used to it if she kept doing that kind of work. From the bathroom, Daisy rejected Joyce's suggestion firmly, saying she would never do it again. She cried in the shower, feeling cheap and ashamed of what had happened the previous night. Meanwhile, James ran to the streets with the necklace, hoping to find Daisy, but this search was unsuccessful. He decided to go back home and get ready for work. At work, James couldn't shake off the memory of Daisy pleading with him, saying that she needed the money and she wasn't a call girl. The guilt weighed heavily on him, making him restless throughout the day. After work, he hurried to the spot where he had picked Daisy up, hoping to find her there, but she wasn't there. Desperate to find her, James described Daisy to other girls who worked in the area, but none of them knew or heard about her. James then realized that he didn't even know Daisy's name, her phone number, or where she lived. The only clue he had was the necklace she had left behind in the hotel room. For 2 weeks, James searched for Daisy, and it was the hardest time he had ever faced. Even though he usually couldn't go a night without being with a woman, he managed to stay away from them for 2 weeks. Daisy's beauty, her clear skin, and her innocence stuck in James' mind. After his unsuccessful efforts to find Daisy, James decided to return to his normal routine. One evening, coming back from work, he picked up another call girl from the streets and took her to a hotel. But as soon as she tried to get close to him, it was like he was seeing Daisy, and James smiled. But when the new girl touched him, he realized she's different, and he felt really irritated. His reaction was unlike James, as Daisy's image clouded his mind. He offered the street girl money to go home and decided to hang out with his friends instead. While James was with his friends, he sat down and couldn't bring himself to admit that he was in love with the girl he met on the street. He knew his friends would tease him about it. One of his friends, Steve, noticed James' mood and tried to cheer him up. When Steve showed him a photo of a beautiful girl on Facebook, James wasn't interested at first, but Steve insisted. When James looked at the photo, he saw Joyce wearing the same necklace that Daisy had left behind. He asked Steve to send the screenshot of Joyce's profile. Later, when James was home, he checked Joyce's profile and saw a picture of her that looked a lot like Daisy, wearing the same necklace. He felt like he had finally found the person he was looking for. Since Joyce's phone number was on her profile, James decided to take note of it. He tried to call Joyce, but she didn't answer. James decided he would try calling her again the next day when he went back to work. The next day at work, James called Joyce. Joyce picked up the phone. "Hello," Joyce answered. "Hi, it's James," James said. "I'm really sorry about what happened the other night. I took your virginity just for money, and I feel terrible about it. I want to see you again and give you back the necklace you left behind." Joyce cleverly realized James was referring to her sister Daisy. She played along. She asked James how he got her number, and James explained he found it on her Facebook. They agreed to meet at the mall to exchange the necklace. At the mall, James and Joyce met. Although James noticed some differences with Joyce compared to Daisy, her face was almost the same. He apologized again and urged her not to go back to the street. Joyce explained that she had to do her aunt's demands. "My aunt will send me out of the house if I don't go to the streets," Joyce replied. "I have nowhere else to go or stay." In response, James offered her enough money to find accommodation and to start a business so that she wouldn't have to return to the streets. Grateful, Joyce accepted, and James gave her a check for a large sum of money before they said goodbye. When James got home, he felt a difference in his connection with Joyce compared to Daisy. He couldn't shake the feeling that Joyce seemed more exposed. After thinking it over, he assumed it was because they hadn't seen each other after a long time. Joyce went home feeling incredibly excited. "I've hit the jackpot," she said to herself. Not only will I not have to live here, but I will also be able to get a shop and have a handsome and wealthy guy like James." Joyce was on top of the world. A few days later, she started packing her things in the house. When Daisy asked her where she was going, Joyce replied aggressively, "I'm finding my own way. I can't keep staying in this dirty place." Daisy pleaded with her to at least tell her where she was going, but Joyce refused to share any details. Joyce moved into a new house and also started a big clothing and jewelry business. James continued to communicate with Joyce over the phone, and he was happy to hear that she was doing well. However, he felt like something was missing. James decided to take Joyce to his house and show her where he lived alone. Joyce's eyes widened, and she smiled to herself, realizing that her life had changed for the better. James continued to support Joyce financially so that she wouldn't lack anything. One day, James arrived at work to find his office in a mess. He called his secretary to inquire why the cleaner had not showed up, only to learn that the cleaner had stopped coming. The secretary had quickly tidied up the office herself. James instructed her to put up a notice outside his office for the position of a cleaner. Meanwhile, Daisy had been looking for a job because it was difficult for her to make ends meet, seeing that Joyce had left her. When she saw the signboard advertising the cleaner position at James' office, she wasted no time and applied for the job. The secretary asked her to start work the next day. Daisy resumed work late the next day and quickly began sweeping the office. When James entered and saw his dusty table, he instructed his secretary to call the new cleaner to clean his table and mop the floor, which she did. As James turned to make a phone call, Daisy entered the office to clean up the table and chairs. In the process, she accidentally knocked over a file, causing both her and James to bend down to pick it up. Their heads collided and then they looked at each other. They recognized each other's faces. Shocked to see James, Daisy tried to run from the office, but James stopped her by holding her waist from behind. Daisy apologized, saying she was sorry for being there. James saw the innocence in her face, and the same innocence she had the night they met. Feeling a deep connection as he touched her, James realized there was something special about Daisy. He asked her why she was here. After he had opened a big shop for her, Daisy simply responded, "I'm sorry, sir. Please let me go." While James demanded answers from Daisy, Joyce called him. They talked while Daisy was in front of him. After the call ended, James seemed shocked and asked Daisy who she is. Daisy, shivering with fear, pleaded with him to let her go. James assured her that he wouldn't hurt her and persuaded her to sit down. He then asked her if she had a twin, but Daisy replied that she only had an elder sister who looked exactly like her, and people often mistook them for twins. Still surprised, James asked her for her name, and she replied, "Daisy." James then showed her the photo that Steve had sent to him earlier. "This necklace, you forgot it in the hotel room. Is this not you wearing this necklace in this photo?" James asked. Daisy replied, "That's my elder sister. How did you get her photo on your phone?" James replied, "Never mind," and shifted closer to the chair where Daisy was sitting. He apologized sincerely for hurting her that night and explained that he had been searching for her since then. He acknowledged that he had made a mistake by taking away her virginity in such a way and asked Daisy to give him a chance to make things right. Daisy insisted that he hadn't done anything wrong because he had paid her, but James continued to plead for her forgiveness. He then asked her for her phone number, but Daisy didn't have a phone. When he requested her address, she explained that the place didn't have an address. Despite their conversation, Daisy expressed her desire to continue her work because she had other offices to clean. James picked up the rug and threw it away, telling Daisy that she wouldn't work as a cleaner anymore. Then he took her out to buy a phone and accompanied her back home. When they arrived, James noticed photos of Daisy and Joyce on the wall and the poor condition of the room. As he was going through the photos, the landlord arrived with some goons to throw Daisy's belongings out of the house because she owed rent. Despite James' attempt to reason with the landlord, he refused to listen. In response, James gathered Daisy's belongings and took her to his own house. Daisy had many emotions when she moved in with James. She was grateful for his help, but also felt a little too much to handle. James really wanted to assist Daisy however he could. James noticed that Daisy seemed uncomfortable staying here for even just a day. So he decided to find her a better place to stay. He called his lawyer to help him arrange a house for him. While James was talking to his lawyer, Daisy walked in unexpectedly. James quickly ended the call and told the lawyer he would call back. Curious, Daisy asked why James was doing so much for her when she had nothing to offer him in return. James reassured her that he didn't expect anything in return and he just wanted to help her relax. But Daisy, feeling uncertain, suggested that if James brought her here just to be intimate with her, then she couldn't stay. James responded firmly, saying he called his lawyer to find her a better accommodation. He confessed his feelings for Daisy, saying that he liked her a lot and he's even in love with her. However, he emphasized that he wouldn't force her to accept his feelings. Instead, he promised to assist her, regardless of their relationship status. The next day, James and Daisy went to see different apartments. James said he would pay for whichever one Daisy liked best, so she could be happy and comfortable. They visited a few places, but Daisy didn't like any of them. Even though the apartments they saw were all nice and costly, but Daisy felt like she couldn't trust James. She felt safe around him and started thinking about staying with him in his house. James and Daisy went back to his house. He promised they would go apartment hunting again the next day so she could choose one that she likes. But Daisy surprised him by saying she wanted to stay in his house. She asked him to promise not to be physical with her. James smiled with excitement. "I am grateful that you trust me. I won't come close to you except you want me to." Daisy smiled and replied, "So you still want to get close with my consent?" James responded sarcastically, saying, "Yes, because I love you so much. You changed me. Since that day we met in the hotel, I stopped womanizing. I wouldn't go a day without touching a woman, but you indirectly and directly turned me away from all women." James was curious about Daisy's background, so he asked her to share more about herself. He wanted to know where she grew up, about her family, and what happened that made her end up on the street that day. Daisy shared with James that both her parents passed away a while back, leaving her with just her elder sister. Life in the village was tough. They decided to move to the city to try and make a living. They had a plan to work hard, but unfortunately, her sister ended up on the streets. Despite this, her sister always took care of all the bills. However, on the day Daisy ended up on the streets, her sister was sick and unable to work. She felt pressured to go out and hustle to make ends meet. Her sister even threatened to kick her out if she didn't go. With nowhere else to turn to, Daisy had no choice but to join her sister on the street. As Daisy recounted her story, tears welled up in her eyes. James felt a wave of empathy for her and pulled her into a comforting embrace as she cried while sharing her difficult experience. Daisy also asked James why he was womanizing. James explained that many women were interested in him because of his money, and some even deceived him. Since then, he felt that instead of being with women who were only interested in his wealth, it would be better to pick girls from the street. He believed that they might be more genuine and not after his money. Daisy comforted James, and they shared a comforting hug. Meanwhile, it had been a week since Joyce had been trying to reach James, but he refused to answer her calls because he knew she was an imposter. Despite their avoidance, Joyce decided to pay him a visit at his house. Daisy and James had become good friends after their heart-to-heart talk. Daisy felt safer with James, and James appreciated her trust. One day, while they were relaxing at his house, there was a knock on the door. James went to answer it, and to Daisy's surprise, it was Joyce. Joyce looked shocked to see Daisy in James' house. Joyce looked at Daisy suspiciously. "Why are you here?" she asked sharply. Daisy felt scared. "I'm staying with James," she said quietly. Joyce softened a little, but still seemed angry. "Why?" she asked. Daisy glanced at James for help. "James is helping me to find a place to stay," she explained. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." Joyce seemed a little bit calmer. Then she turned to James, looking angry again. "Why did you bring her here?" she demanded. James sighed. "I'm helping Daisy," he said. "She needed a safe place to stay." James, with a serious look, "Since you left her and you were pretending to be her," he said. Daisy furrowed her eyebrows in confusion. "Pretending to be her?" she asked, puzzled. James explained how Joyce had pretended to be Daisy, but he was relieved that he finally found the real Daisy. Before Daisy could fully understand, Joyce tried to pull her away, insisting they go to her house, but Daisy refused, and James stepped in to protect her. "Leave her alone, Joyce," James said firmly. Joyce glared at Daisy, threatening to deal with her later, before storming out of the house, feeling furious that Daisy might take James away from her. When Joyce got home, she decided to visit her uncle and aunts in the village to seek their help by evicting Daisy from James' house. So she journeyed to the village and lied to her relatives, who had never helped her or Daisy before, to come and take Daisy away. They all arrived in the city, and Joyce took them to James' house, but James wasn't there. Daisy opened the door and welcomed them in. The aunties and uncles entered the house, knowing James would be a very rich man, so they wanted to strike a deal that would benefit them and not Joyce. The aunties and uncles spoke amongst themselves and agreed to wait for James to return. However, Joyce was impatient and wanted to forcefully remove Daisy from the house. But because of their own selfish interests, they realized that if they took Daisy out and James returned without seeing her, he might file a police report against them. Daisy decided to call James to come home due to an emergency. He rushed home only to find a lot of strangers in his house. He greeted them, and then they introduced themselves as Daisy's paternal relatives. They told James they came to take Daisy away because it's against their tradition for a girl to stay in the same house with a man who isn't her husband. James replied, "I'm sorry about breaking your tradition, but I would love to marry Daisy." When Joyce heard this, she got very angry. The uncles and aunties replied to James, "Now you are talking." They invited James to their village to take the list of marriage arrangements. Joyce told her uncles and aunties that this wasn't the reason she invited them. She invited them to evict Daisy from the house, but now they were arranging a marriage. James promised Daisy's family that he would come to their village in 3 days' time to take the list and make necessary arrangements. Daisy's paternal family were happy, and James gave them a large sum of money to cover their transportation costs and expenses at home. This made Joyce angry because her plans had backfired on her. After Joyce and her relatives left James' house, Daisy confronted James about why he had promised to go to the village and take the marriage list without asking for her consent first. James replied, "That's the best thing I could think of." Daisy became angry and stormed out of the sitting room after a heated argument with James. James went to Daisy's room to talk to her. Expressing his deep feelings and desire to be her husband, he pleaded with her, telling her that he loved her and promised never to hurt her. But Daisy refused, and James, feeling defeated, told her that he would return to his old ways. He left her room, but Daisy ran after him and held him from behind, telling him not to go. She confessed that she really liked him too and had grown to love him. Finally, she agreed to marry him. Hearing Daisy's words made James incredibly happy. He hugged her tightly and kissed her forehead. Meanwhile, Joyce is at home, worried about what to do next since her first plan had failed. She couldn't let Daisy have such a rich man to herself and began plotting her next move. Joyce called Daisy on the phone to let her know that James is hiding a big secret from her. Daisy demanded to know, but Joyce said she would give her the whole details. This information got Daisy really worked up. Daisy and James planned to visit her hometown to get the marriage list, even though Daisy was worried. James took her to meet his uncle first and other family members. Daisy liked spending time with James' family. They also welcomed her very well. When they started their journey to Daisy's hometown, Daisy couldn't stop worrying. She tried to be happy, but the fear stayed with her. James tried to cheer her up, but Daisy still felt scared. One day, while Daisy was out, Joyce called again. Her voice was serious, and Daisy knew something was wrong. Joyce told Daisy that James is hiding something big from her, that he had HIV. Daisy felt shocked and sad hearing this information, not knowing James had kept this from her. She knew she had to talk to James to find out the truth. Daisy couldn't believe it without hearing James' side of the story. Once Daisy got home, she hurried into James' room to talk to him. But as she approached, she overheard James talking on the phone. He sounded urgent, saying he needed medicine because he was very sick. Daisy's heart sank as she listened in shock. She felt like Joyce's word had been confirmed, and she believed that James had HIV just like Joyce said. Feeling betrayed and hurt, Daisy quietly retreated to her room, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't believe that James had kept such a big secret from her, especially after knowing he is sick. Daisy felt like she had been kept in a dark room, and the realization left her feeling broken and alone. Meanwhile, the medicine James urgently needed is actually for his uncle. He was too unwell to accompany them for the marriage agreements. James worried about his uncle's health, explained the urgency to the pharmacist, asking for the medicine as quickly as possible. However, Daisy overheard only the part of the conversation and misunderstood it. She assumed James was referring to himself as being sick and urgently needing medicine, deepened her belief that James had been hiding his HIV status from her. Feeling hurt and betrayed, Daisy couldn't bring herself to confront James about what she had heard. She struggled with the weight of her emotions, torn between her love for James and the fear of what his secret might mean for their future together. Daisy called Joyce and told her James is really having the virus, even though Joyce knew it wasn't true. She acted like she believed Daisy. Joyce told Daisy to leave the house right away because she was worried James might give her the virus. Feeling scared and confused, Daisy agreed to leave that night. She promised to meet Joyce outside and that they would run away together. Daisy felt torn between her love for James and the fear of her own safety. She knew leaving James would be hard, but she is also afraid of what might happen if she stayed. Throughout the day, Daisy acted distant and uneasy around James. He noticed her strange behavior and asked her what was wrong, but Daisy brushed it off and didn't say anything. As night fell, Daisy quickly packed some of her belongings and headed towards the door, intending to leave without James noticing. However, unknown to her, James was outside making a phone call. Just as Daisy reached the door, James called out her name, startling her. He asked her where she was going with her bags at this late hour. Daisy felt shocked and caught off guard, but she knew she couldn't hide the truth from James any longer. With a heavy heart, Daisy decided to confront James. She told him that she couldn't marry him because he had lied to her and kept something important hidden. She accused him of having HIV and not telling her about it, despite their plans for marriage. Then James responded, "Daisy, where did you hear that from? Why didn't you just ask me instead of living like this?" And then Daisy answered saying, "Joyce told me. When I came to your room to ask you, I overheard you urgently asking for medicine on the phone, saying that you were very sick." James giggled. "That medicine was for my uncle. I only told the pharmacist so that they could bring it quickly, so uncle could get well and join us for the wedding." You trust Joyce more than me? It's fine, you can go. If you believe I have been keeping things away from you, then just leave. I don't want to be with someone who doesn't trust me. I have shown you how much I care and love you, but you have taken me for granted. Daisy heard the sincerity and hurt in James' voice, realizing she needed to apologize. She tried to enter James' room, but then Joyce called. Daisy ignored the calls and turned off her phone. She got to James' room to ask for forgiveness, but he told her to leave, or he would leave instead. Daisy approached him and held him from behind romantically, but James remained upset. Daisy turned James around and hugged him, apologizing and promising that the incident won't happen again. She kissed his forehead and reassured him. James responded saying, "A mere kiss on the forehead won't suffice. He needs more to forgive her." Daisy, feeling shy, asked what more he wants. James held her cheeks and said, "I just want you to love me and trust me." Daisy breathed with a sigh of relief, admitting she thought he wanted intimacy. Then James reassured her, saying, "I won't force you. If you want us to be intimate, it will be with your consent." Daisy grinned mischievously. "I gave you my consent, but you have to catch me first." With that, she dashed out of the room. James ran after her. They played a game of hide and seek, laughter filling the air as they chased each other around the house. After a while, they both grew tired from the playful pursuit and settled down on the couch in the sitting room. Daisy and James sat close together on the couch, holding hands and feeling a rush of affection. Daisy leaned in and kissed James slowly. He responded with equal warmth, their lips meeting in a gentle embrace. Encouraged by her boldness, Daisy guided James' hand towards her cheek. Relishing the touch, James, drawn to her longing gaze, he drew near, his kisses becoming more intimate. Their affection grew, each kiss deepening their connection. Daisy's heart raced as James' hand explored her body tenderly, sending shivers down her spine. With whispered words of love, Daisy led James to the bedroom, their movements filled with passion and closeness. As they gave in to their desires, their love-making became a beautiful expression of their love and affection, each moment affirming their bond. Meanwhile, Joyce grew tired of waiting for Daisy outside. Feeling frustrated and impatient, she decided to leave. James woke up very early. He made something special for Daisy. He decided to make her breakfast. He went to the kitchen and found eggs, bread, and some fruits. He made scrambled eggs and toast. He also cut up some fruits into slices. After preparing the breakfast, he carried it carefully into his room. He wanted to surprise her with breakfast in bed. Daisy was still asleep when he entered the room. James gently woke her up and presented the breakfast to her. Daisy was surprised and delighted by James' thoughtful gesture. They enjoyed the breakfast together in bed and started their day with happiness. After they finished eating, James told Daisy that she could rest for a bit. He told her that he would come back later in the afternoon to pick her up. They had plans to go together to select outfits for their upcoming wedding. James wanted Daisy to feel refreshed and ready for their outing, so he encouraged her to take some time to relax before their shopping trip. Daisy agreed, feeling grateful for James' considerate nature, and settled back in bed for a little while longer. While James was on his way to work, he decided to call Joyce and have a serious conversation with her. He warned her to stay away from Daisy and him, as he sensed some tension building between them. Joyce responded saying that the only way she would consider staying away from Daisy is if James paid her off. Shocked by Joyce's demand, James asked how much she wanted. To his disbelief, Joyce replied that she also wanted to have a one-night stand with him. James was so shocked and firmly rejected her proposition, telling her that she was out of her mind. In a desperate attempt to manipulate James, Joyce threatened that if she didn't agree to her terms, he wouldn't be able to marry Daisy. She even went as far as claiming that James should be grateful for her, that if she hadn't forced Daisy out of the house that night, he wouldn't have met her. Feeling frustrated and angry, James couldn't help but to express his disappointment in Joyce's behavior. He reminded her that instead of being happy for her sister, she is turning into a villain by trying to control their lives in such a manipulative way. James let out a sigh and ended the call. Joyce called James back. She changed her mind and didn't want just one night with him anymore. She asked James to make her pregnant and give her money so that she could leave town. Joyce said no one would marry her because everyone knew about her past on the streets. She blamed Daisy for wanting to leave her behind, now that she had found someone rich. Joyce threatened to make James and Daisy's lives a living hell on earth if he did not agree to her suggestion. James was very angry. He told Joyce to leave them alone and that he wouldn't agree to her suggestion. He warned her to stay away from Daisy, and then he ended the call. Later that afternoon, James arrived to pick up Daisy. They went shopping for the things that they needed for the wedding. On the day of the wedding, James made sure that security measures were in place to prevent anything from going wrong. Despite Joyce's attempt to sabotage the wedding, James' security measures halted all her plans. The wedding proceeded smoothly, and James and Daisy were successfully married. They returned to the city as a married couple. Joyce was deeply hurt by James marrying Daisy. Fueled by anger, she began to destroy everything in her house. She felt betrayed, thinking, "I sacrificed so much for Daisy, and now I have neither a man nor money. It would be better if James died." She vowed not to let them be happy, believing that if she had no husband, Daisy shouldn't have one either. With a bitter laugh, she expressed her resentment. Meanwhile, the newly wedded couple enjoyed moments of happiness together as they celebrated their marriage. Daisy woke up feeling scared. She had a dream that her husband James got killed. She shouted out loud, and James woke up too. He asked her what is wrong. Daisy hugged him tight and said that she had a scary dream where he got killed. She didn't want him to go out that day. She just wanted him to stay with her. James hugged her back and told her not to worry. He said it was just a dream, and he had to go to work. It had been a month since they got married. He needed to earn money after spending a lot on the wedding. Even though Daisy didn't want him to go, James had to leave. He promised to come back safely. Daisy watched him go, feeling sad, but hoping he would be okay. James got into his car and started driving to his office. Along the way, he spotted two men fighting in the middle of the road. He honked his horn, hoping they would stop, but they ignored him. Feeling concerned, James decided to step out of his car to intervene and separate them. However, he didn't realize that these men were actually goons hired by Joyce. As James approached them, the goons revealed guns hidden in their pockets and threatened to shoot him if they didn't follow him. Terrified, James compelled and followed them. They led him to a secluded area in the bush. Once they were there, the goons mercilessly beat up James while Joyce watched, laughing at his plight. James pleaded with Joyce, begging her to spare his life for Daisy's sake. But Joyce, fueled by her anger and resentment, coldly refused. She declared that if she couldn't be happy, then Daisy shouldn't be happy either. With James pleading for mercy falling on deaf ears, the goons dug a shallow grave and buried him alive. Joyce and the goons left the bush, leaving James trapped and fighting for his life beneath the earth. Two people passing by saw what was happening. They immediately rushed to the grave and started digging James out after Joyce and the goons had left. They worked quickly, knowing that time was running out. Finally, they managed to free James from the makeshift grave and carried him to a nearby hospital as fast as they could. In the hospital, doctors and nurses worked urgently to save James' life. They treated his injuries and worked to stabilize him. Despite the severity of his condition, they were determined to do everything they could to ensure that James survived. As James lay in the hospital bed fighting for his life, Daisy was really worried at home. She couldn't stop thinking about the scary dream she had. She tried calling James, but he didn't answer, so she went by his office. But they told her he wasn't there yet. This made Daisy even more worried. She felt like something bad might have had happened to James. She decided that she had to find out where he was and what was going on. Daisy called James' uncle and shared her worries with him, telling him about her scary dream. She explained that she couldn't reach James because his phones were off, and he wasn't at work or at home. James' uncle tried to calm her down and told her to wait until the evening for the news. But as the evening came with no word about James, Daisy's anxiety became unbearable. She and James' uncle decided to go to the police station and report for his disappearance. Meanwhile, Joyce celebrated her victory, knowing that she had caused pain and suffering for Daisy. Daisy couldn't sleep all night because she was worried about her missing husband. She called Joyce to tell her what happened, hoping for some comfort, but Joyce pretended to be sympathetic, even though she was secretly happy that James was gone. The next morning, the police told Daisy that they had found James' car on the road, but he wasn't there. This made Daisy even more scared. She cried and blamed herself for not convincing James to stay home. Meanwhile, James woke up in the hospital after 4 days of being unconscious. When James woke up, he immediately thought about Daisy. He was worried if she is okay. He wanted to get up, but the nurses said he needed to rest. So he asked the nurse if he could use her phone to call his uncle. James called his uncle and told him everything that happened to him. He asked his uncle to make sure Daisy was safe. His uncle said Daisy is currently with him at his house. James begged his uncle to keep Daisy safe and not let her leave because he thought she might be in danger. He also asked his uncle not to tell anyone where he is until he got better and could go home. After the call, James asked the nurse how he ended up in the hospital. She explained that some people had brought him in. They had found him buried alive, but thankfully they had saved him just in time. James was grateful and wanted to thank them personally. He asked the nurse if he could meet them, but she said she would let him know if they came around. James nodded, relieved to know that he had been rescued and eager to express his gratitude to his rescuers. That evening, Joyce called Daisy to ask if there is any news about James. Daisy replied that there was no news yet. This made Joyce very happy, but she pretended to be concerned and comforted Daisy. She promised to visit her soon. However, Daisy mentioned that she was staying at her in-laws' place, not at home, just in case Joyce wanted to come over. Joyce assured Daisy that she would visit her whenever she returned home. After hanging up the call, Joyce couldn't contain her excitement. Seeing Daisy sad brought her joy. "You want to enjoy when I sacrifice my body for you to eat?" she muttered to herself. After a month of recovery, James returned to his base. He visited his uncle's place secretly at night, and when Daisy saw him, she couldn't contain her joy. It was as if her life had returned back to her body. She hugged James tightly and asked him why he had left her like that. James explained everything that had happened to him, detailing Joyce and her accomplices' actions. Hearing this from James, Daisy was shocked that her own sister could do such a thing to her husband. After much talking, she took James to her room in her in-laws' house. There, she gave James good news that she is expecting their child. This news brought additional joy to James' mind. He hugged her close, and Daisy fell asleep in his arms, feeling safe and loved. The next day, James, his uncle, and the police went to Joyce's house to capture her. When Joyce saw James, she was shocked to see him alive. She asked James how he had survived, but he just hissed in response and instructed the police to take her away. Despite her attempts to flee, the police managed to capture her. She then led the police to where her accomplices were hiding. The police apprehended all of them. The case was then taken to court, and after deliberation, Joyce and her accomplices were sentenced to life in prison without parole. Justice was served, and James could finally rest, assured that they would never be able to harm anyone else again. Joyce's regret came too late. She realized she was in the wrong place. Despite feeling remorse for her actions, she understood that her regret couldn't undo the harm that she caused. Now facing the consequences of her actions, she grappled with the weight of her decisions. However, it was a harsh lesson learned too late. She had come to terms with the irreversible consequences of her actions. After some months, Daisy welcomed a beautiful bouncing baby girl, who was a carbon copy of her father, James. Overjoyed by the new addition to the family, James couldn't help but appreciate Daisy for entering his life and transforming him from a womanizer into a more responsible person. In return, James surprised Daisy with a luxurious shop, fully stocked with goods. Daisy was overwhelmed with joy and gratitude, thanking James for coming into her life and helping her to become a better person. She appreciated that James didn't judge her for their one-night stand, but instead supported her and stood by her side through thick and thin. Together, they embraced their new roles as parents and cherished the love and bond that they shared as a family. This is the end. What have you learned about this story? Personally, I feel the lessons learned about this story is that number one, for whatever reasons, we should never compromise our morals for material things. And then secondly, if you have a pure heart, definitely good things are going to come your way. If you were Daisy, do you think at any point you would have done what her sister convinced her to do, which was standing by the road and having a one-night stand for money because of the pressure she faced, or you would have continued to firmly stand by your decision? Do you think Daisy was weak for not standing by her decision, or maybe she was just under so much pressure? Please like, comment, and share, as this helps me to continue creating stories like this. It really encourages me when you guys comment on the video, where you're watching from, if you're loving the video. I really enjoy interacting with you guys, and it really helps me and motivates me to continue creating such videos. This is where the story ends. Love you, bye.